Good afternoon, everyone. You are very welcome to the Women's Aid Domestic Abuse Awareness webinar. The panel would be delighted to receive any questions you may have. Please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your PC or laptop screen. If you are using an iPad, you will find this feature located at the top of your screen. Without further ado, I will now hand you over to your host, Karen Brennan, Health Promotion and Improvement Officer. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Karen Brennan. My name is Karen Brennan, and I'm a Health Promotion and Improvement Officer in CHO DNCC. Thanks very much for the introduction, Lauren. I'm delighted to welcome you to our second webinar of our October webinar series for staff. And today we're going to be dealing with the topic of domestic abuse awareness. And I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Niamh Wilson from Women's Aid. Last year, this topic was one of the most well-attended webinars that we did. And there was great interest in the topic, and it's something that we don't really speak about enough, and it's great to have this important topic under discussion. We'll have a live Q&A at the end of the talk here, and our hashtag throughout the month of October is hashtag Staff Health DNCC. So if you're on Twitter, if you would please use our hashtag. And so without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Niamh, and we'll have some questions and answers at the very end. Thank you very much indeed.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Karen, for that introduction. My name is Niamh Wilson. I'm a trainer with Women's Aid, which many of you probably know is a national organisation that works on the issue of domestic abuse. And I'm going to be with you for a short while this morning just to provide some basic information around the issue of domestic abuse, on what it is, on where people can get help, and also on how people may be able to support a colleague or a friend that they are concerned about. So I know this is your kind of wellness week for staff, for members of the HSE. And domestic abuse is an issue that is very common in our society, and inevitably there will be many staff members within the HSE who either are experiencing domestic abuse or have experienced domestic abuse in the past, or perhaps even grew up as a child in a situation where there was domestic abuse. And so we really want to acknowledge that this can be a very difficult session sometimes for people to sit through. And even if this is an issue that hasn't impacted on you personally, it can still be hard to really face up to the facts of domestic abuse, which are very difficult at times to confront. So I really want to flag that with you now. There's absolutely no problem if people want to take a break or to leave the session if you're finding it too difficult. The session is being recorded, and perhaps you could access it at a later stage if you feel it would be a better place for you to do that. And certainly if this brings up difficult feelings for you, is upsetting, please do make sure you get some support on that. If you feel you need to talk to a trusted person, and resort to your usual self-care strategies that you might use when you're dealing with something difficult in the context of your work. So I want to, before I get into, just apologize. I have a pretty heavy head cold at the moment, so I'm a little croaky and I may have a cough or a croak or two along the way. So just want to flag that with you before I get going. So I'm going to just share my screen with you, and I'm going to work through some slides just to give you a brief overview of the issue now. Okay, so I'm sure most of you are aware that Women's Aid are a national organisation. We provide frontline services to women experiencing domestic abuse, but we also are a policy and a lobbying, a campaigning and a research and an education organisation as well. We've been in existence for almost 50 years now in Ireland. So everything I'm bringing to you today is based on our experience over those 50 years, but it is also evidence-based. So all of our work, all of our practice is evidence-based. And as I said, the focus of this short presentation today is first to give an idea of what domestic abuse is, really understanding what constitutes domestic abuse, where people can get help if they are in a situation where they feel that they're at ongoing risk of domestic abuse, even if it is something that is in your past. I'm going to just provide you some information in relation to the specialist domestic violence services that exist in the country. And I'm also just very briefly going to talk a little bit about how you can support a friend or a colleague that you're concerned about. Because we do know that the workplace is a very supportive and safe place for the vast majority of those who do experience domestic abuse. And research that has been done with women who experience domestic abuse and men who experience domestic abuse indicates that over 2/3 of those people actually find that one of the safest places for them to be is in work. And many of those people found really good support from colleagues, from people managers, from HR managers, from employee assistance schemes. But certainly maybe noticing something that is up with a friend or a colleague, or being told by them that something is going on. And we really encourage people to be quite proactive in responding and in reaching out to people, because work can be the one place where someone might feel safe that they can actually tell somebody that they're experiencing abuse. So just want to create a little bit of context around the issue that we're looking at today. And as I said, domestic abuse is a very common phenomenon in our society, very sadly. 1 in 4 women in Ireland will experience some form of physical or sexual violence since the age of 15 within the context of an intimate relationship. Now, this figure is taken from the very last prevalence study done in Ireland, which is 2014. It is 8 years ago. We have no reason to believe that there has been any decrease in the prevalence figures of domestic abuse in Ireland. We have seen an exponential rise in reports to the Gardaí, in access to the family law courts, and in women accessing frontline domestic violence services. We believe it's probably more likely, not necessarily because there's an increase in the prevalence of violence, although we don't know that, but that's certainly that the issue is getting more known about, there's more awareness, and the shame and stigma is somewhat abating, although that is still a huge barrier to women coming forward to disclose that they are being abused. Now, in that same prevalence study, 1 in 3 women said they experienced some form of emotional abuse from their partner or ex-partner. And what I really want to flag at this stage is that when we're talking about emotional abuse, we are not talking about once-off isolated incidences that may happen in the context of lots of relationships. In most intimate relationships, people are going to experience some form of conflict. Sometimes people behave less than their best selves, and things can be said that are unfair, that are cruel, and that are unjustified. But when we're those kind of isolated, very instances that are not part of a wider pattern of abusive and controlling behavior, are what we call couple conflict or situational couple conflict. Now, when we're talking about domestic abuse, what we're talking about actually is a pattern of behavior. And I just want people to really keep that in their heads, that we're talking about a pattern of behavior, a multiplicity of ways of behaving that's designed to actually get power and control over the other person. And that's really key. That's what domestic abuse is about. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But before I do that, I just want to address the gendered aspect of domestic abuse, because there often is a lot of questions out there, do men and women experience domestic abuse in equal amounts and in the same way? And the fact is that they don't, but it is absolutely clear that men are victims of domestic abuse, that some women are abusive, that people in same-sex relationships can be either both perpetrators or survivors, victims of domestic abuse, and that people who are, not non-gender conforming, people who are non-binary can also be perpetrators or survivors of domestic abuse. So I want to say that really clearly here. Anyone can be a victim of domestic abuse, but the overriding and the most key risk factor in terms of being a victim of domestic abuse is being female. And this is evidenced in, internationally at every level. And we saw very recently ourselves here the first time the Gardaí have actually desegregated their data and looked at the gender and the relationship of the victim and the perpetrator. And again, this really reflects all of the research internationally, which indicates that the vast majority of victims of domestic abuse are female, the vast majority of perpetrators are male. So having said that, and this is what we know is understand as a form of gender-based violence. Having said that, it's really important to recognise that anyone can be a victim of domestic abuse, and everyone needs to have access to the same kind of supports and protections. So hopefully if there's anyone here who is experiencing domestic abuse, who knows someone who is domestic abuse, they might be in a same-sex relationship, they might be a man, they might be experiencing abuse from either a man or a woman, you can certainly draw a lot from the presentation today as well. So what is domestic violence and abuse? And I'm specifically very much drawing on the understanding of how men who are violent and abusive actually behave, their pattern of behavior within intimate relationships that really harms and damages the person that they are in a relationship with. And I'm very much the woman that they're in a relationship with. So I'm very much focusing on that today because I'm drawing from our experience, but I'm drawing from all of the empirical evidence on how women experience domestic abuse, how men who are violent and abusive behave in relationships with their female intimate partner. And there will be some overlaps with how men who are abused experience domestic abuse, but there are also some differences, and I just want to flag that at this stage. So domestic abuse is basically about a process of coercive control. You sometimes hear people describe coercive control as a form of domestic abuse, but that is not correct. Domestic abuse is about a process of coercive control. And coercive control, we need to understand it as a form of subordination rather than a form of violence. But physical violence is very much used by the vast majority of domestic violence abusers, but it is not used in every case, and it is not the primary tactic. It is not the primary kind of behaviour that abusers use to enforce their dominance, to gain and maintain power and control. And we really need to have an understanding of the much of all the non-physical forms of abuse that really what women tell us are the most harmful to them in terms of the impacts of what they experience. So coercive control, as I said, is a pattern. It's a course of conduct as opposed to instant-based crime. So it's a pattern of intimidation, of isolation and control, as well as assault. And as I say, assault will be used by the majority of perpetrators, not all, but it will not be the primary tactic nor the most damaging or harmful to the victim survivor. Coercive controllers exact high levels of fear and entrapment, even when the violence has stopped. And it is so important for us to remember that even if the physical violence has stopped in a relationship, even if somebody has ended a relationship, has got away from the person who's being abusive to them, those levels of fear and entrapment will continue for a long time. And we do know that post-separation is still a very high-risk time for women, particularly the first year. And we need to really recognise that these levels of fear and entrapment are something that women experience for a long time after a relationship ends, and will continue whether or not there is physical violence being used by the perpetrator. And the harms that victim survivors identify are cumulative as a result of the ongoing entrapment rather than because of discrete acts of violence. Now, obviously, discrete acts of very serious violence are hugely traumatizing and harmful, but it's the cumulative result of what the perpetrator will do to really undermine the person's sense of self, to isolate them from others, to make them doubt their own judgment, their own assessment of reality. to really actually distort that person's sense of perspective. And most importantly, and this is really at the core of coercive control, to remove that person's independence, autonomy, and agency. It's the cumulative result, the impact, which is what the perpetrator intends to affect, is the greatest harm that women will report. So we really need to understand that when we want to maybe reach out to someone who's in a situation who we are really concerned about, we want to try and focus much more on those kind of impacts, not to ignore physical violence when there is any information that indicates to us that somebody's at risk of physical violence, but to not just focus on physical violence, because we're actually missing probably about 99% of what's happening in a relationship where a woman is being abused, violated, and controlled by her intimate partner. So I am going to stop sharing now, because I would like to share a video with you which really illustrates to some degree what coercive control is about. And this is a very useful educational video, and it's available online on YouTube. And of course, I'm sure that could be shared with participants here. If any of you are in an educational role or would like to look at this again, this can be looked at. It's available on YouTube, as I say, and it's called Where is the Line? And it's very useful for really thinking about the early stages of the relationship and when the line starts getting crossed from a healthy relationship into what might be a controlling relationship. And it helps us kind of just identify some of those behaviors that might really alert us to a relationship that might not be healthy. So I'm just going to ask for that video to be shared now, please. Lauren, thanks.
Coercive control. Where is the line? Not all domestic abuse is physical or verbal. Coercive control can be hard to spot. What may appear romantic and loving can cross a line and become damaging and harmful. But what is coercive control, and where is that line? Love bombing. A new relationship can feel fun and exciting. Having someone shower you with affection, admiration, and even gifts can feel fantastic. But sometimes it can be too intense. A bunch of flowers is nice, but 10 bunches, and a phone, and a holiday can be overwhelming if you feel you can't say no, or owe something in return. A call or text is nice, but constant messages can be intrusive. If you feel you're under pressure to reply quickly, or you don't have your own time and space, the line has been crossed. Compliments are nice, but compliments like, "You're the only person who gets me," "I only ever want to be with you," could be a warning if it makes you feel uncomfortable. A relationship should take time to grow. If you feel you're being rushed and things are happening too quickly, it may have crossed the line into love bombing. Isolation. A new partner can be a great addition to your support network, as well as friends and family, and having space outside a relationship for family and friends will only make things better. But a controlling partner will try to limit or cut off support of friends and family, telling you that other people in your life don't respect you or don't like you. They can also control your access to money, work, or education. If this is happening, the line has been crossed. Monitoring. It's nice when a partner takes an interest in your life, but if that interest becomes a constant presence in everything you do and everywhere you go, it's crossing the line. Listening to your calls, having access to your social media, photos and DMs, maybe even tracking your phone, are all signs of coercive control. Having your own privacy and boundaries is not the same as keeping secrets in a relationship. Gaslighting. A good relationship is built on trust. We all get things wrong sometimes, and it's okay to admit when you're wrong. But if you're always wrong and constantly doubting yourself, and you keep hearing things like, "I never said that," "You're so paranoid," "You're crazy," "You're making things up." If you keep questioning the evidence you've seen and heard, you could be experiencing gaslighting, and the line has been crossed. Coercive control is persistent and deliberate behaviour with the aim of gaining control over another. It's wrong and against the law.
Muted. So we saw there just that very short video, which is made in Northern Ireland, actually, which really illustrates very well some of the tactics of coercive control. And obviously, there is no way that anyone is going to exceed that kind of control to another adult willingly. That's not going to happen. So no relationship starts off with somebody, you know, being able to isolate someone to that extent, you know, monitoring them to that extent. It starts off very slowly, very incrementally. It builds up over time. And one of the key tactics of the abuser is that they really are hiding their true persona from their partner at the beginning of the relationship. They're hiding their intentions, and they're making sure that their actions are really presented as justifiable in terms of, first of all, maybe eliciting the woman's sympathy around something. So, you know, I just really like to stay in contact with you because, you know, my last girlfriend, you know, was you know, very neglectful of me, and I just sort of feel a little bit insecure about that. So, you know, he might try and kind of manipulate her emotionally. He will certainly over time really make sure that she begins to take responsibility for everything in the relationship, for the emotional temperature in the relationship. He needs to do that in order to be able to be sure that in time he can become more dominant, more aggressive, and get away with it. He absolutely needs to isolate her, because if you have access to family and friends where you can get support, where you get reflected back to you another image of yourself than the image that he wants to shape and create of you, and that's really what coercive control is about. It's about his image of how a woman should be as his intimate partner. If you don't comply with that, then he will most certainly over time begin to tell you that you're no good, that you're inadequate, that you don't deserve him, that you're a terrible person. And when a woman has access to other people who reflect back, you know, her value, her worth, it is so much more difficult for him to do that. So isolation is an absolutely essential tactic of coercive controllers. And of course, it's really important to really flag at this stage that you may encounter a woman at some stage, or a colleague or friend, or you may yourself have experienced or be experiencing the situation where the coercive control is not complete necessarily. Now, this might be because the coercive controller, the abuser, you know, may not be somebody who is intending to control absolutely every aspect of a woman's life. Now, in the majority of cases that I have worked with, I've worked with thousands of women. I've been in this work for nearly 35 years. Most of the women that I work with, every aspect of their life was controlled by the abuser. But I also worked with women who, even after years, still had some agency, still had some resources, still had some space for action in their lives. And of course, work is the one place where women do have that. And it is so important that women are supported to stay in work, because we do know that 1 in 10 women who experience domestic abuse end up leaving their job, losing their job because of domestic abuse. It could also be that's the earlier stages of the relationship, and the abuser has not yet managed to entrap the woman to such an extent that she doesn't have that room for action in her life at this point in time. So just want to flag that we need to be aware of that we're not, you know, just because somebody isn't 100% controlled doesn't necessarily mean that they're not experiencing domestic abuse. They may still be working. They may still be somebody who has access to resources. They may still have access to who they are at some level. And yet at the same time, within the front door of their house, and what they're experiencing is real harm, and because of the behavior of their partner or husband. And I really want to flag that harm continues post-separation. So many women that we work with actually have left their partners or husbands, but are continuing to be harmed by them through this pattern of behavior. So I'm just going to share my slides again. And I'm just going to share this image, the power and control wheel, which kind of encapsulates what I'm just saying. So in the center, you see power and control is the intent of the abuser. In the wheel, you see physical violence and sexual violence, which is used sporadically by abusers against their partners. And it can be very serious for some women. It can be less so for others. even when it's low level, there can be an instant of much more serious physical and sexual violence. And so we need to always be aware of the risk of physical injury. And unfortunately, the worst outcome being where a woman is actually violently killed by a partner or ex-partner, which is something that we hear about every year. But if you look in the spokes of the wheel at all the other different forms of violence and abuse, you can see they're non-physical forms of violence and abuse. And they are really, as I say again, and really want to reiterate, these are the forms of violence and abuse that women tell us time and again are the most harmful to them. And this is the pattern of behaviour that goes on over years to really wear down the woman's sense of self, to make her world very small, and to really remove her freedoms. And really, so that's why we really want to understand this as a form of entrapment rather than as a form of violence. So having said that, if anyone is in that situation, if you know someone who's in that situation, if you're concerned about them, there is help out there. First of all, you know, we have a whole raft of legislation and policy that is available to somebody who's at risk of domestic abuse. And so that is available. But I would say the first stop, the first port of call is really the National Free Phone Helpline that we run in Women's Aid. It's 1-800-341-900. And really would like to really flag with people that even if somebody is saying to you, no, that's not happening to me, you know, everything is fine, but you have a strong sense that somebody is at risk, that this is going on, to just even suggest that they call the helpline at any time if they feel that they could use some information. It could be that the person doesn't want to disclose, but that they might then go and actually call that helpline number. So I would just really want to flag that with you. That will really give people access to the 39 domestic violence services that exist around the country. They all provide, first of all, a listening ear, real understanding about what women are going through, a range of wraparound services that women need, such as court accompaniment, advocacy, refuges, support groups. Some of them will provide services for children as well, but not all. So please, you know, be aware that these domestic violence services are developed specifically to respond to the experience of coercive control. I'm just going to, these three websites are key. They all have interactive maps where you can just click on an area or on a county, and you will get the full details of the services in your area. So for North Dublin, if you just click on Dublin and any of these, you'll see the whole list of services for the Dublin area. I just want to flag stillhere.ie very particularly, because it also includes all the sexual violence services, and it includes the male advice line for men who are experiencing abuse, and the LGBTQ helpline for people in same-sex relationships, trans people, people who are non-binary, who may feel more comfortable to access support through that helpline. So if there was one help website to really remember, I would really advise to keep that stillhere.ie in your head. And finally, I want to just flag about supporting a colleague or a friend. If somebody does disclose to you, or if you strongly suspect or are concerned that somebody is experiencing domestic abuse, there's two core principles, and one is to work from where the woman is at. So rather than, often women, what they hear from people is, you know, you should just leave, you should just get out of there. Unless we know that that's what the woman is really thinking about doing at the moment, we really risk pushing her back into that situation if we say that to her. We need to really listen out for what she's saying about where she's at, how she's making sense of the situation now, what she feels is feasible, what she needs to change at this point in time. We may not always understand all the decisions she makes, but we really need to always take her lead. And that's the second core principle, which is do no harm. And we do no harm by staying victim, survivor led. We know from our experience, but this is also evidenced through empirical research, that the best assessor of harm and risk is the woman herself. The best assessor of what is the best thing to do for herself and her children is the victim survivor herself. So we really always need to stay victim survivor led, no matter how difficult it might seem at the time, no matter how much a decision of someone does not make sense to us. I can tell you that all of the women I worked with are as rational as all of you, and they are making rational decisions based on the situation, the risk that is ongoing to them, their children, and their knowledge of the barriers to seeking help and getting protection. Because contrary to assumptions about women who experience domestic violence being passive victims, they most certainly are not. They are very active help seekers. Often they do not get the help they need. So if we can just listen to women, provide understanding, be non-judgmental, and stay victim survivor led, we will not do harm, and we are more than likely going to do some good. So I could just really just flag those. And I'm just going to very briefly put these up. We call these our back pocket responses. If somebody does disclose to you that they're experiencing domestic abuse, that these kind of responses are useful, because first of all, we know that they're the things that women tell us are really useful to hear. And secondly, it gives you a minute to think. You know, if you a little bit taken aback or a bit shocked, or you just to use these responses, because even that, things like "thank you for telling me this" is very affirming. What you're describing sounds like abuse, and communicates that you understand abuse, and that'll help the woman feel, okay, I can talk more. Clear messages: the abuse is not your fault. You have a right to live free of violence and abuse, and you have options, and I can help you find support. And that can be as simple as passing on the helpline number to somebody. So I'm going to leave that there again with the helpline, and I'm just going to flag that we have a specific program. I know what's happening. There we go. An employer engagement project, and this is a specialist training and policy and development service for employers with the aim of creating a supportive, understanding and safe workplace environment for victim survivors of domestic violence and abuse. And we do provide a whole package to employers on that. And this is going to become really important, because there is going to be new legislation going through the Dáil, which probably will be enacted within the next year or so, which is going to provide mandatory domestic violence leave to employees. And it will be very important for employers to understand how that can actually be implemented and supported. But there's so many other things that can be done within the context of employment that really centres employee safety and well-being when it comes to domestic abuse. So if you'd like some more information about that, please do contact us. So I'm going to stop there and just see if there's any questions that anyone would like answered.
Hi, Niamh. Thank you so much. That was a very, very engaging talk, and I certainly learned a lot myself just watching it. We have had some questions coming in, and I'd like to also invite people from the audience. We have anonymous questions for today's topic. So if anybody wants to put in a question, you can be assured of anonymity as you do so, and you can place them in the chat function, and we'll do our best to get through some of them. I just wanted to ask you about, Niamh, about where you might suspect that a colleague is a victim of domestic violence. Maybe you've seen something in a change in their behaviour, or you might have noticed maybe a bruise or something, or that that something has changed. How to manage that if the person hasn't said anything? Because that's I think something that was one of the questions that came in. How to support colleagues, but I think as well as them disclosing, what do you do when they haven't disclosed?
Yeah. And thanks for asking that, Karen, because that's exactly the kind of thing that we really want to talk to people about. First of all, we would really encourage people to find a place and a way to have a conversation with the person. Don't ignore your instincts or concerns. You could be the key person in that person's life who opens up this whole secret and breaks this silence that they've been living in for years. So we would say the best way to approach it is to approach it through the impacts that you have seen. So obviously you're first of all telling them, you probably have a trusting relationship with the colleague, and even if it's someone maybe you don't know very well, we would say maybe take a little bit of time to get to know them a little better. or, you know, just invite them to have coffee a couple of times and then maybe broach the subject with them. Now, I know people go, oh my God, there isn't time, this is urgent. We really want to people to recognize that for women experiencing domestic abuse, for any victim of domestic abuse, be they a woman or man, anyone, actually getting out of a situation, getting to a point where they are safe and where they are well and they are no longer being harmed is a long journey, and all we're doing is contributing to that journey. There's not one of us can fix this. Okay, so we really need to think, how can I contribute to this journey? So really think about an approach where, if you know you have a trusting relationship or don't, when can I, you know, in a space say to this person, look, I've noticed a change in your behavior recently and I'm somewhat concerned about you. Is everything okay at home? Yes, everything's fine. Well, I'll tell you also why I'm concerned, because, you know, I've noticed that you used to come out with us for a drink after work and you don't ever anymore, and we never see you anymore. And I'm just wondering, is there something or someone who is preventing you from coming out socializing? The use of the word someone is really important.
Yeah.
So you start off quite indirect, you get a little more direct, okay, someone. And then you can say something like, you know, if you still have a strong sense, you can say, look, I'll tell you why I'm asking you this, because I know that many, many women experience domestic abuse, experience a lot of anxiety or depression, or, you know, it changes how they are a lot. And that's what I'm seeing. And often that their partner tries to isolate them from others. Now, this might not be happening to you, but I'm just wondering, is it? Okay, yeah. So you've named domestic abuse there. And that's really key, because we know that that's going to increase disclosure. She may say, no, absolutely, that's not happening to me. Look, okay, I hope it's okay. I asked you. I hope I haven't upset you. It's just that I am concerned for you. If there's anything going on that you feel you could use some support with, you know, you can talk to me. Be confidential. And, I just wanted to offer you that support if something is happening. Okay, it can be hard to do, but we do know that the vast majority of women say they were glad they were asked by somebody. The vast majority of women will be glad, if they're experiencing domestic abuse, that they were asked. Usually you're asking in the context of not maybe noticing one thing. It's usually a combination of things that gives you a strong enough sense something's going on here in her life that's not good, and I have a feeling it's domestic abuse. So, you know, you're usually going to be thinking about more than one sort of impact, I suppose. And so we say it's through the impacts, through addressing the impacts, expressing your concern for her, starting off direct, edging towards domestic abuse, naming domestic abuse. And by actually saying many women experience domestic abuse, you're letting her know that you know something about domestic abuse. And again, women tell us that one of the key things that helps them tell someone is if they get a sense that that person knows something about what I'm going through. Because one of the things that stops women telling is shame and self-blame and fear of being judged. And so they're going to get a sense, maybe this is someone who I feel it's safe to tell them. So that would just be our advice if you want to approach something.
Thanks so much, Eve. That's very helpful. Another question came in. How do you stay victim survivor led while simultaneously safeguard children as a child protection social worker?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know that is a huge challenge often, but there is a whole approach to this work that is evidence-based, that is proven to have really positive impacts for children. And it's a child-centered approach to domestic violence work. And it's about a partnering approach with the adult survivor. It's about partnering with the adult survivor in the best interest of the child. And so there's a whole way of working around with women where we absolutely name our concerns for the children and our fears for the children. But we really name who we are concerned about. We are concerned about your husband or your partner's behavior, and the fact that this is harming the children. We're not concerned about you. The evidence is that the vast majority of women in domestic abuse strive to parent well. and many of them continue to parent very well. Often what happens is that what women hear from people going into this is that they have failed to protect their children. So again, they're feeling judged, they're feeling blamed, they feel guilty, they have fears, what's going to happen now. If we can help women to understand that we are absolutely on her side, that we know who the problem is and it's not her, and that we can affirm her mothering, because women are continuing to mother through highly adverse situations where their parenting is being actively constrained by the abuser, and yet they continue to parent. If we can give her all of those affirming messages, yet at the same time be clear that the children's safety and welfare is paramount, we will actually be able to collaborate with most women in the best interests of their child. There are, of course, situations, and we know this, where the parenting capacity may have broken down, where the woman is so entrapped that she is absolutely unable to put her children's needs first. But in the vast majority of cases, women do, and it is really the behavior of the perpetrator that is at issue and at stake here. So I would say anyone who is involved in child welfare and safety work to access the Safe and Together Institute, safeandtogether.com. It is an international institute that works with all sorts of agencies, judges, social workers, everyone around the world around this whole issue of child safety and welfare in the context of domestic abuse. And they have some fantastic materials, and they've also some excellent and very accessible training. And just even
safeandtogether.com.
Safeandtogether.com. I would highly, highly recommend it to anyone involved in child safety and welfare. Yeah.
We're just kind of a little bit over our time, but we've still got quite a number of people stayed on. So I think if everybody's okay, we might just stay on and do one more question. We have a number of questions that have come in, but if I could pass them on to you afterwards, would that be okay? And then we maybe get some answer to those questions. One of the questions is there any information about domestic abuse within the minority ethnic groups, such as Roma communities? Are there specific services for these marginalised groups? Great question.
Yes, there aren't, unlike other countries, Ireland does not have specialised services for women from minority ethnic groups, apart from Pavy Point, who do have a service for traveller and Roma women. But they're primarily around supporting women to access the mainstream services. But we have a great new initiative now happening in the Immigrant Council of Ireland, in the International Organisation of Migration. We're called community mediators or community navigators. So these are women from different communities of immigrant women, and they're trained around the issue of domestic abuse, and their job is to help women navigate through the systems and to access the services, and to also maybe work with services like the mainstream domestic violence services or the Gardaí or the courts to help really kind of mediate with them on behalf of the woman, so that there's a much more culturally sensitive approach and understanding of what immigrant women experience in relation to domestic abuse. So they're kind of two initiatives and two services that are ongoing at the moment. And of course, a Kidwa, which is obviously for immigrant women and primarily established by Black African women, is very, very active in addressing the whole issue of gender-based violence as well. So I would say if anyone is working with a woman from any of those communities and they feel that going to a mainstream service is going to be a barrier to them, to always direct towards those services. Oh, of course, the mosques all have women's groups, and they're all very active in addressing domestic abuse. So all of the mosques and the Muslim Women of Era, they're very active in addressing domestic abuse. So, and some of them have family support workers who will absolutely address domestic abuse as part of their work. So I would always think about like who might be the organisation, the group that this woman is going to feel most comfortable with, and direct towards there. Because if that service, if that organisation can't provide a more full response around domestic abuse, they will refer to domestic abuse service. But really the woman needs to get a sense that she's going to experience that non-judgmental, trusting response from people from her own community first is going to be really important. And she will when she goes to those groups. Absolutely.
Okay. I'll take just one last question. What legal routes can people experiencing domestic abuse take? Is that a question that you can answer now, or is that something?
Well, I would say just, you know, look, there's a whole raft, we have very good legislation in Ireland. We have civil courts where people can apply for a raft of different kind of domestic abuse orders. And then obviously coercive control is now a crime since 2018. So there's actually a crime of coercive control in Ireland.
Yes.
There is a lot of sort of conditions around eligibility and that, although there's far less now, it's much more open and much more accessible. I would say if anyone really needs to get legal information about domestic abuse, just to call the helpline. Our workers will provide them with any information they need around the legal aspect of domestic abuse. And our helpline will also have a page on legal options, our website. And so just, you know, there's a lot online, and there's certainly information readily available over the helpline, or if you were to go to a local domestic violence service, they would also do that. And the helpline is completely anonymous as well, just to say that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that. Niamh, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the call with us today. And I think a lot of people still have questions. Some of them are quite specific questions, and we could pass them over and maybe make them available as a result of the talk that we've done, and we might be able to make them available in general terms for people. So thank you very much indeed for and everybody who joined us today. I just want a reminder that there will be a recording of this talk, and you'll be sent if you registered for the talk. And I'd like to also inform you that our next talk is about the dementia journey. And also this is very much geared around staff members who are will find themselves in a situation where they're looking after a loved one. They might be also bringing up their own family and caring for a loved one with dementia. And many of us in our lives will be touched by the dementia journey. And so this is very much tailored for our HSE staff. And we're very much looking forward to having Anna Dalton from the Alzheimer's Society coming. And she'll be here next Tuesday. So if you haven't already signed up, we'll be sending the link on for that afterwards also. And if you wouldn't mind taking a very quick opportunity, just 2 minutes to fill out our survey, you'll be entered into a chance of to win one of our 5 all-for-one vouchers if you'd fill out the survey and let us know what you thought about the talk and your experience today. And just a reminder that there'll be a link to the recording for today's webinar that'll be emailed out to everybody and available on the Health and Wellbeing channel on YouTube too. So thank you very much for joining in, and we look forward very much to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you very much. Goodbye.